All right, well, I reckon that's a good place for us to begin. How's everyone doing this evening?
Good.
Cool.
How are you guys?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. How's the week been, Brian? Anything interesting
It's
come up?
been pretty good, yeah. We got a surprise long listing for a pretty nice International Design Award last week, which is exciting.
Oh.
I entered the collaboration table that I did for John Wardle, the In Clover, in the
I
Design
saw that.
Awards.
Right.
And it's made the last 20 projects in it, I think, which is pretty fun. A bit unexpected.
It's a worldwide design thing.
Yeah, it's pretty big. So then the long list goes to a short list, and then the short list goes to winners. And
Cool.
I'm pretty sure I can already tell you who the winner is, and he's a former guest on the show.
Ah,
Ooh.
Yeah,
exciting.
so Arthur Seigneur, straw marquetry Frenchman.
the
We'll
straw
have to
guy, that's
get
right. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to get the episode number, but he's done this incredible cabinet collaboration with Adam Goodrum, another Aussie designer, which is just something else. So yeah, we'll post some photos of it on our Instagram and maybe link back to the previous episode. Might be a good way to activate the old Instagram.
Sorry,
But,
so when's the shortlisting? When do you
I
find
think
that
it
out?
happens in September. I think.
Okay.
Yeah. But like I said, pretty chuffed to even make the long list on it.
Yeah.
And yeah, just been really, really busy. So it's good. Very much
How's
looking
that?
forward
You
to
were
winter finishing because I'm a bit fed up of it. But how's what? Sorry, Joe?
You were talking last time about, actually, it could have been in the episode that I screwed up.
Destroyed.
You were talking about the coffee table, the Chad top
Yep.
coffee table that you're working on, and how quickly you were able to get through it the second time, and how has that progressed? Is it like over and done now? I assume?
So it's kind of, it doesn't really have a deadline. So it's kind of,
Right.
I've been taking
Pushing back.
yeah,
and pushing
like
back.
I've been taking it home and weaving a bit every night, and then being attacked by the cat halfway through, and then my son getting in the way of it. So yeah, it's definitely been a lot quicker. Like I think it was the episode that got lost talking about the jig making and making the jigs to do all the tenons and the shaping of the frame, has taken hours off the piece. So yeah, that's pretty
If you
exciting.
had a straight run at it now,
Mhm.
how fast could you go Monday to Friday or something like that? Or
I reckon it would probably be about 45 hours, but obviously with glue time and cure times, probably 45 hours over 3 weeks, something like that. But
Okay.
probably, I think I would have spent double the time on the first one, the time
Mhm.
included in the jig making and stuff. So, yeah, that's good.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome.
Yeah, about to install some shelves, just waiting on the final hardware to arrive from the States. Yeah, lots on. How about you, Joe?
I've finally been able to get into the site where it's a massive, actually I'm not sure massive, but architectural as the word. This house is like right on a beachfront next to these giant sand dunes, and I've made all the cabinetry, a lot of the cabinetry for it, and it's been sitting around for months waiting for the flooring to actually get down and be finished, and now we're on the home stretch, so I'm on that job this week. And
That's the birch ply one that you posted to your Instagram.
Yeah,
it looks
I just posted
fantastic.
a picture of so essentially we've made a hallway into the master bedroom via the cabinetry, and the wall is a brick wall that's curved, and we've followed the curve with the cabinetry around to create like a pathway into the main room. And so that's kind of what excited me about that job. And I've done 2 other bedrooms which are more straightforward square boxes, but I'm also going to be tomorrow installing these giant walnut triple bifolding TV cabinets that kind of hang off a wall. So that's going to be a fun day.
How about you, Robin?
Not very much woodworking, but what I have been looking into is, with my move back to Townsville next year, I'm looking into the idea of potentially renting a commercial property, or at least getting my head in that space. Everything that I'm coming up, everything that I'm finding that's coming up is around 25k per annum for a small shop. Is that about right?
How much square meterage? Over 100?
They're around 200, the ones that I'm finding.
Yeah,
that's about
that
right.
about right?
I'd say in Melbourne you'd probably round that up to nearly 30.
Yeah, it's funny because we've had so many people on the show talking about this, but I've never really paid attention to figures because they mean nothing in my life.
Yeah.
But now just the thought of if I wanted to go down that road, having to have a defined profit to cover that rent.
500 a week.
First, and this is coming from someone who's been able to have the luxury of a home workshop, it's going to be a really hard thing to make the move to that. Really, really tough.
Yes, finding the overheads is the problem for all small businesses, I think.
Because Joey, you would have started in a home workshop, right? I think we've talked about this. Yeah. Bryan, have you always been in a rental?
Yeah, always been in a rental.
So that's part of that's where your head's at permanently. It's a cost that's
pretty much.
Yeah, well, it's
fun times.
I'm glad I'm looking because I'm in two minds because I can either look at when I get back to Townsville to get a bigger property with a bigger mortgage and put a nice big shed on it and work from home, or keep the little 3-bed house that we have that's it's almost halfway paid off, keep that and then put the money into a commercial property, and then there's all this other
where
hidden
I'm
costs.
at right now as well. Yeah.
The good thing with leasing, the upside is that you're not responsible for all the upkeep of the building and stuff, which can become very expensive very quickly. If it's an older building, suddenly something happens and you have to put a new roof on it. It is 20 grand, whereas you may be kicked out if you had to get a new roof put on because it just may not work. But if you can work out the overhead, so you can just be earning that, whatever it is, $500 a week minimum, just to keep you in that position.
Or you just split a space, find another maker and go in halfers, and that sort of relieves a bit.
Yeah, that'd be the way to do it.
There's a potential opportunity there, but I don't know where it'll be in March. But anyway. But so that's
interesting.
This could turn into something that might be a topic for the show in the future.
Yep.
And speaking of the show, we have another guest for everyone tonight. All the way from Melbourne, Victoria. I feel like probably at least 50% of our guests are from Victoria. That's
we haven't had a Melburnian on in at least 2 shows.
So I'd like to welcome to the show Nick Atkins. How are you this evening?
Pretty good. I've got to say, a little bit nervous. Not sure exactly what I have to bring to the party. I've listened to a few, and I'll hopefully bring my A game and provide a bit of interest for you.
Tall tales.
Well, looking just a very quick look over your Instagram feed, I think there's a fair bit that you're going to be able to bring to the show this evening. So, with that in mind, why don't you give us a bit of a background on what you do, and for everyone who's potentially in a similar situation, how did you get to this place?
Well, that's a bit of a story. So I run a business down in Docklands in one of the last sheds there. We have about 1,350 square meters there. One of the old sheds has plenty of great ventilation and birds to boot that come through the roof. But it's called the Victorian Wooden Boat Centre. And it was originally started by my grandfather in the early 90s. So I am 33 now, so that was about the same age as me. I think it was 88 I was born. So I find myself in an interesting position to take up the mantle. A few years ago, my grandfather retired, said, right, next month, business is yours, and it's your problem.
Wow.
I'm moving down to Port Fairy, so yeah, make something out of it.
That's exciting.
And I've been working with him for quite a long time. We do a real mix of things. My grandfather really, his love affair for designing and stuff came from when he was pulled out of school in England, and he started a printing press apprenticeship. Taught himself to read on the job, and then that sort of evolved over the years into publishing and then graphic design. And then when he immigrated out to Australia many years later, he taught graphic design, and that lent into industrial design. And then eventually he had enough of that and indulged himself fully in boat building. He'd always been an amateur boat builder, but him and his son, my uncle, started boat building in the early 90s in Victoria Dock there, in a shed that no longer exists.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And so we've been in the current shed for about 17 years, which is pretty crazy to think about, because when he moved into the first shed, they said, look, don't spend any money. We're going to develop the whole of Docklands. You're going to be out of here in 6 months.
Wow.
And he was there for, like, I don't know, 12 years or something. And then with the...
So, is there a potential with your current building that it's going to go, or has it been protected somehow?
Undoubtedly. The whole of Docklands
so?
is being developed into apartments mostly, and
wow.
the last wharf there is actually signed, sealed and delivered to basically be more apartments and be built up, but they can't build apartments on the wharf, so there's a lot of talk about community orientated spaces and activities along the waterfront. On the wharf, the shed will go, but so there is a bit of hope there.
It's kind of depressing, isn't it? You have this awesome old building that's actually doing what it should be doing. And
well, our shed's not actually heritage listed. It's not one of the original sheds. It's an old shed, but it's not an original. So they're looking to restore the original facade and the pitching that used to be there. And they've talked about it, and we've been on the master plan for the redevelopment for quite a number of years, because they really love what we do. We do mostly sort of amateur, pre-pandemic and the L word. We did a lot of mostly amateur courses. We'd bring people in and, sort out a project and help them build it. And aside from that, used to do a bit of heritage woodwork for like Luna Park, used to rebuild the scenic railway.
I saw that on your
some
Instagram.
other
That
stuff.
looked awesome.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mixed bag. Boat builders as a whole, it's a bit of an interesting take. If you would ask me what I do, it's like I just kind of indulge myself, really. But
So
that
how
was
did you
actually...
get to the point where...
You go, Joe.
Oh, how did you get to the point where Granddad said, you know what you're doing enough? It's yours. How much time had you had there?
Well, it was an interesting thing. I did school, didn't have any idea what I was going to do. My grandfather's like, look, you're never going to work here. You can come here after school and on weekends, because my father lived up north, so I didn't see him much, but I spent a lot of time with my older brother and my grandfather and my uncle down the docks there. We used to build little boats and do lots of little things, and I just had this free-form sort of childhood of just making things. And my grandfather, not being strictly from a background of traditional boat building, he was all about the process. And one of his favourite quotes was, if I have to tell you, I might as well do it myself.
Yeah.
So is he fully self-taught, Nick? Like, learned from books or learned from TAFE, or how did he learn?
He'd always been like learning boat building, and he was an avid reader, and so he's read just about every boat book on the face of the planet. So there was always something more. He was a fountain of knowledge, and he was always a really good storyteller. Very good with people, very good with teaching. So I'd always tag along. We used to do night classes. Used to run troubled youth programs with the justice system and other things, where you bring groups of people in and you teach them, as another one of these expressions, it's not what you teach about boat building, it's what you teach through it. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of very great cliches that go along with that, but there is a definite satisfaction in being able to see your day's efforts materialize in front of you. But the hard thing with the boats is because it's such a long journey to get to the first step. So traditional boats is a very difficult topic to try to bring young people and new people into, because I'd say it's the iPhone generation. Unless it's a touch screen, it's hard to get that instant gratification that they get through these apps and devices, and, you know, horrible things like TikTok.
Yeah.
Terrible things like
So
TikTok.
That's an interesting point of view.
Yeah, so it's really changed the entire market. It used to be a lot of middle-aged and retiring people would come in and they'd want to build boats, and would occasionally build boats commercially or bring bigger projects in and do maintenance and stuff like that. But he really had a love of little boats and trying new ideas and concepts. We're always doing something new. And yeah, a big part of what I do now is all digital. I'm really into CNC cutting and drawing. My first drawing project was the Luna Park sign back in, I think it was 2011. And yeah, and it was funny because my grandfather was a bit frustrated and he was like trying to work out how to get the project going. And I'd been working in the workshop for a few years there full time after he promised me I'd never get a job. And I said, well, what's the matter with this, you know, this big exciting thing we're going to do? He's like, oh, but we've got to draw it up on the computer and it's really hard. And I said, well, do you want me to try? And he goes, can you do it? And I said, I don't know. I've never tried. So I gave it a go. And since then, I draw everything I do in Rhino. And
Awesome.
It was a really interesting transition, having built boats traditionally growing up, so that like by the age of 10, I was building classic small clinker boats. Being so familiar with the material meant that it was quite easy for me to pick up a new tool set, if that makes sense. Because with boat building, you know, the fundamental thing, and this is the hard part with amateur boat building, is the first thing you do is take a grid of numbers, a set of offsets, and then you loft it out scale on a wall or a floor, and then you have to 3D conceptualize and fair it, because there's no way that traditional plans were ever correct. You know, how could someone on paper make this beautiful flowing fair object? Because boats is all curves. So you'd have to do that, and you'd fair it and you know, batten it off the wall. You'd have your favorite battens and stuff, and then you'd take templates off and set it up, and it was such a long process. And so off the back of drawing up the Luna Park sign to get it consistent from photos, you know, heritage and all, I then started designing or drawing for build clinker kits and stuff like that. For, you know, grandfather always said, it has to be a better way, has to be a better way. We can't keep doing this. This takes 6 months to, you know, build a little boat. So yeah, we just kept pushing it.
I love that. Yeah, I love that your granddad was so forward thinking.
Yeah,
You know,
it's
like the
quite
opposite
amazing.
of what most, you know, it's not what you tend to hear. So I think that's so awesome.
He was always willing to try something new, and he was always preferring to not tell me how someone else did something. So, you know, figure it out. And if I got really stuck, yeah, he'd come along and would try something. But he was always really super progressive, and he was always keen. I think the whole thing for him was just a journey of discovery with everything we did.
That's cool.
You want
It's a lot
to
harder to
see
not
the
have him there
plan
now.
sets, Joey. They are incredible. They look like, I think you've drawn some stylistic things from traditional boat building plans.
I've taken a lot of inspiration, you know, from the roots, because another one, we stand on the shoulders of giants. So all this stuff I've learnt, and I have quite a collection of little books and plans, and I love little boats. I'm not sure why it is that I like the smaller boats better. Maybe, you know, more projects, more ways to try things. But yeah, I'm really, really passionate about trying to find a way that we can still do this in the future.
Yeah.
And what I've done with kits, and my little clinker kits, they're all parametric grasshopper formulas now, which is a bit weird. As far as boats go, it gets pretty far away from the tradition of lofting them and fairing them on a wall to have them run through a parametric formula. But it's got to be precise, you know. If you're gonna do it on the computer, then you've got to do every detail. Otherwise, I'm better off doing it by hand. I found a long time ago that the half measure of doing just part of it on the computer means you end up spending more time on it.
Yeah.
And that's
We
the
were
thing about good design.
We were talking about that last week, how you can spend so much time on that design process when you bring the computer in. Do you find now doing it on computer that you run that risk?
Yeah. I mean, I'm passionate about what I do, and that'll happen to anyone who has a real passion for what they do. Because you could stop, and but I feel like the moment you stop adding details and drawing is the moment you kind of just sort of say, all right, well, that's good enough. And then is good enough ever good enough when you're making something? There's always, as a maker, when you make something, there's always things you regret as you go. And the computer allows you the ability to go back and change it. And so it's really hard at what point, because you have a deadline. You have to cut this part and you have to put it on the boat and you have to start. But you still want to go, well, what if I do it this way? Or what if I do it that way? So it is an abyss to which you can fall into.
Yeah.
But it's hard. Some projects are going to go, right, well, it doesn't matter.
It's done now, so let's move on.
Yeah.
Like Robin,
And a finished
Robin,
boat is always better than an unfinished one.
This would totally blow your mind. The scripting in Grasshopper that generates the plank. Is it the plank set out?
Yeah, it's mainly my real love is like what you'll call clinker. So the overlapping edges of the planks are glued together. And it always kind of frustrated me. Traditional plank layouts didn't really tend to adapt to modern material. If we're going to build these boats in the future, they're going to be built to plywood. And some people say that's sacrilegious. But plywood is great. You can still fit out the rest of the boats with timber and you can still have a lot of fun with that. But, you really should be designing for the material and taking maximum advantage of that. And that goes from plank lengths to the styling of the planking. And I believe when a boat's in the water, you should probably see most of the planking. Traditional planking is really about a division of the circumference over the maximum width you can fit. Which is to do with the stock you have, but plywood unleashes that.
So would you, do you think plywood boats, I don't want to say better or worse, but obviously there's got to be a benefit in terms, I can imagine, purely from cost, especially if it's a kind of a kit set type thing.
Well, availability alone is the bigger issue.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, when they come to build boats, all they really want to be doing is planing a big old block of hewn pine and smelling, the shavings. That's what they see themselves doing. So you got to try to still have a bit of that kind of, romance to it. But at the same time, you got to say, well, you don't need to touch all these power tools. The machines cut it all out. Just assemble it. So there's a lot of beveling and block planing and, all that sort of stuff. People get into it. And then, as you get closer to the finish, then there's, the sanding and painting and the sanding and painting. And boats is pretty bad for that. But we all enjoy the woodworking of it. So it's a good challenge to try to mitigate how far is too far, and having clients in who aren't experienced, and you can see, having spent years with people who aren't familiar with building, that there is almost like the finishing spiral. Diminishing returns. So protection versus perfection. And everyone wants to build perfect, but it's like, well, I can put $1 sign on what a perfect boat is versus you just finishing it and having a great time. Because the moment you take this thing out, you're going to walk on it, you're going to drag it up the beach, you're going to put it on a metal trailer, you're going to beat it with a chain. So, it's always, I'm always very proud when people actually say, yep, right, this is finished, I'm going to go boating. God forbid.
Yeah, because boats are very utilitarian. I mean,
it's meant to have a purpose.
That's right.
They're treated like furniture. They're treated like art, but at the same time, they've got to be rugged. They've got to be tough, but they've got to look great, particularly wooden boats.
So before you mentioned deadline, I'm interested. I've always kind of wondered how, especially it sounds like you don't have a massive crew.
I've mostly, it's a tricky thing. It's an impossible thing to quote because there are so many details and unknowns, and I hope to get to a better position where I can have the reassurance of the clients where I say, look, I want to do a good job for you. I'm going to look after you, but please God, don't ask me to put a price on it.
Right.
Because some of this stuff just never ends, and the more you, particularly with restorations or fix-up work, the moment it's like a woolen jumper, you pull that thread, a knitted woolen jumper, and it just keeps going. Boats is renowned for project creep. So I tend to try to go for more newer boats and small boats and hopefully new builds, things that I can draw on the computer. And so having deadlines is a very tricky thing, and I'm trying to get better at it, and now I have more help because I've had people help me over the years, but I've only in the last year got my actual first apprentice. So that's a very novel thing for me. And immediately after he signed up, his TAFE evaporated. So I don't know what the deadline on his apprenticeship is when there's zero training over the last year. Poor boy. But he's keen and passionate. But yeah, so trying to get projects done is always a challenge, because it takes one small detail on a coat of varnish or paint, and it's ruined. And the other part of that is that all the materials take so long. Most of the paints for marine things, they take like a good 12 hours before they stop being sticky. They got to flow and they got to be tough. And then you need like a dozen coats of varnish inside a boat. And it's like, oh my God, all those details, all those planks, all that wood I put in, all these, surface undulations. I've got to not let drips form.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it can be pretty challenging.
Are you, so what's the kind of a timeline? Are you building one new boat in a year, or
well, this is the thing, if I was
or...
into production, it would be a very different story. And to sate my desires on answering those questions and having everything down to a precise spreadsheet, I started another business accidentally, which is purely like sort of manufacturing, where we build ant farms. It's a bit weird, but we design these things and I use the same machines, and it's all about production and lean manufacturing, and it's enjoyable because it's completely different from the boats. And so all you can do is have experience
ant
with
farm,
boats.
as in like a little kid's ant farm that they can get into.
Yep.
That's awesome. That's such a cool
thing. It's a bit wild, bit different.
But someone's got to make it.
It's just natural
ants have got to live
progression.
somewhere. Yeah, boats, ant farm. Yeah. Particularly one of the main materials used in that is what do they call it? Hebel, aerated concrete.
Oh yeah.
Which is a very weird material for a boat builder to be building things with.
Yeah.
So deadlines are an impossible thing. And when someone comes to us and they first say, I want to build a boat, or I want you to build a boat, and it's all right, well, send me some pictures of what you're thinking, what you want, and then we can start talking about it. Because when someone comes to you and says, I want a bookshelf, and they wave their hands around, you don't really know how you're going to say, all right, sure. With boats, and there's always the triangle of compromise, which is sail, row, and power. And wherever you throw the dart in, that is a compromise amongst the other uses. Because boats is a bit of a funny thing. People think that they're kind of like cars, and you can say you can fit 3 people in it or 4 people in it, but it's a very different concept because of the way they have to balance in the water, and they have to balance the forces of the sailing. And is it going to have an outboard on the back? What happens with the weight? So it's when they come to us and they say, I want to build a boat, you say, well, why would you? That's the first question, because you could go out and you could buy something off Gumtree and not use that just as much. So there's a lot of reasons, and quite often the reason is because people need a personal development project, or they've had a tragedy in their life and they're working as a family to overcome it, and this is part of the process. It's a form of healing. So that's something I'd really like to do more of, but it's really hard to find time, sort of being overrun by myself with my own endless project creeps and timelines. But doing classes is why I've spent all those years, like over 10 years, developing kits that are really efficient and don't require dangerous power tools for amateurs to use, because there's so much that could be learnt in these processes.
How does a class typically run? I mean, presumably you're making like a small skiff or a boat.
Yeah. So you line 5 or 6 projects up. You have all the parts ready to go. You ask all the questions up front so they know what's going on, and then a couple of evenings a week they come in, and on a Saturday they can do free build time. And the idea is, sort of 12 weeks down the track, you've built a classic but modern, stable little boat. And we sometimes do the canoe classes, and those stitch and glue canoes go together in about 5 or 6 days.
That quickly?
Yeah. Well, everything's worked out. See, the computer does it. Tabs and slots and stuff. And there's some interesting techniques. There's lots of different ways to build a boat, and this is an important part of the question of why people want to build a boat. Because there's a lot of woodwork that you could be doing that you don't need to do. Different styles, strip planking, cold molding. Some people want to go full traditional, but the problem with traditional boats is they need to stay wet You take them out of the water, they tear themselves apart as they dry out, but then you put them in the water and they rot. So it's a bit of a thing. We tend to sort of steer most of the people, because people don't really have the time to use or maintain old wooden boats unless that's really their primary job. So we tend to push them towards the plywood hulls, which laminating everything together with epoxy in the joints and sealing it up. Everything gets a coat of epoxy before the varnish and before the primer. So these things are encapsulated so that the boats we build now will outlive me. I don't know where the end life is for epoxy.
Have you effectively redesigned the wheel by the way
No,
you're going about boat building?
I don't think I'm a particularly original person. There's lots of options out there and lots of things. It's just that I've had my entire life to obsess over the small details of specific things. And I mean, you see, it's a tricky thing because there are other people with kits and designs out there, and you never really want to infringe on someone. But when you draw a canoe, it's like there's only so many styles of canoe. When you build a table, how different do you have to make this table versus all the other tables before it? So originality is a tricky thing, because I find that the projects people want to put into it, what they see and what they've been inspired by the things they've liked. So every project's a culmination of personal taste. And you can walk around the workshop and you can point out different details, and you can say to people, look, you might want something like this, or if you want to play with steam bending, then we could do that, or we don't have a big enough garage to keep it. This is the other question. Your table goes in a living room and you're going to use it, but where does a boat live most of its life?
And
the last thing you want to do is have it out in the water.
And with that in mind, when it comes to the trailer, what do you guys do? Is that something that you would dabble in as well, or is that their job?
No. Well, we'll fit a trailer for a boat, and we'll make like custom bunks for it to sit on, or we'll choose rollers or something. But everything now is hot dip galvanized, and the lead times now are well over a year. So recently I did the silliest thing I could do as a wooden boat builder, and I acquired an old wooden boat for myself. And I'm currently taking everything out of it completely, so it's just a raw hull and rebuilding it. I don't know why I do this to myself, and it needed a trailer, and I looked at all these things and I was like, holy crap, the prices have doubled. Availability, if something you order now might turn up this time next year. And so, I find broken ones off Gumtree, and luckily the neighbour's a good welder, and I'll get it regaled, and that'll sort me out. But for something for the clients, for some of the more interesting boats, nothing on the market will suit, so you'll have to have one custom fabricated by a manufacturer. Otherwise, for a lot of little boats, the jet ski trailers do.
Oh, right.
And they're a dime a dozen. People are always breaking their jet skis, so there's always a trailer.
Kind of made for that, yeah.
Yeah. So as long as you change the hard metal and hard plastic skids they put on it, which punch holes in your boat. If you put something soft there, it tends to be fine. But availability is a real issue, like proper timber for traditional boats. When we technically build a lot of composite boats, not full traditional. We take a bunch of different styles and we combine it to make our own meal, basically, different details depending on what people want. But it's all technically composite, which leads to it having a much longer, stable life, pretty much maintenance-free. The only maintenance you'd have to do on one of these sort of little boats is, I don't know, if you damage it while you're beating it with a chain on the beach and sailing it, then you might need to, update the varnish. But generally,
Right.
Yeah, and it's this difficult thing about finding a new way to do things, but not destroying where it came from and why we did it. And by coming up with new techniques, I hope that these rapid builds of these little clinker boats and stuff like that can inspire people to think about why they're done this way. And I'm hoping, I don't know, but these sort of things should be a lead into more research about the more classic methods and appreciation for that sort of work. But it's a hard thing to judge when boats take so long to build. Traditional boats, material scarcity is a real issue.
Are there, like, here in New Zealand, there's a pretty good boat building industry, but it's all modern stuff, and everything's being shipped off to whoever's got the crazy amounts of cash to have these
Some
things
of the
built.
best modern boats are built in New Zealand. Most of the best ones are actually, particularly the performance ones, sailboats and stuff. They all come from New Zealand.
We kind of hear it all the time here, and so it just becomes, okay, yeah, we make boats, and most people don't think much else of it. But obviously that's not traditional boats. I doubt there's anyone doing handmade boats. Like, is there still... There must be somewhere that's actually making wooden boats of a decent size for some reason, even if it's just for
Pirates.
teaching.
There's
Pirates.
a couple of places around. And yeah, there's a few organisations around. Like there's the various tall ships around Australia and around the world that are maintained by large groups of volunteers for doing full traditional boats. But all those boats are, I don't know, I feel like in Australia we don't really support that kind of maritime history, maybe because we're very young and we don't have that much tradition in that regard for that sort of construction. There is a much longer history of Indigenous craft, but that's something that is never really sort of talked about for some reason. It's a bit of a different thing. But most of our inspirations come from sort of Europe and mainly America.
Yeah.
With the woodwork and the boats, and these days with the way things are costing, a lot of people will import a classic American wooden boat, big power boat or something like that. And when it gets in, have a little bit of work done. There is still a bit of wooden boat building. The little niche or sort of area I work in is sort of like enabling amateurs who've never built a boat from different walks of life to build a boat.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I am. Down in Tasmania, they run a few things. There's a couple of places you can do full traditional courses, I think, or maybe one place. The Wooden Boat Centre down in Tasmania, Franklin. The other Wooden Boat Centre, they do a great job down there, and they have lots of different projects. Some are year-long, sort of like what they call training courses. But again, it's hard to get accreditation in anything boat-related for some reason. But yeah, so there's a bit of it going around, but you have to really search it out. And a lot of the small, custom, traditional wooden boats are really built by just old dudes in garages who've been saving up timber for a project their whole life.
I only asked about it because I'm curious after what you've been saying about, is there has there been a lack of skills? Is there a forgetting of the traditional skills, or is it just not in our hemisphere?
Well, I guess perhaps it's something similar to blacksmithing.
Right.
It's out there. Some people do it. They don't know it because they have to do it as their living, but they do it because they're passionate. And I guess it's something similar like that. We don't, it's not like we need blacksmiths in everyday life anymore. We don't need wooden boats in everyday life. It's been replaced by, modern freight and infrastructure and airlines and all that sort of stuff. So all those larger wooden boats aren't really necessary apart from historical. And it's really, the wealthiest of the Australians who can afford a wooden boat. And generally they'll be large wooden boats. So there's a small category there of like the DIYs that used to happen a lot more. So just about anyone who walks into the place talks about they remember building with their father or their grandfather a little boat in the backyard, but just as much as all the backyards have disappeared, so has that level of sort of DIY.
That's a good point.
It's very different.
People don't have the space anymore.
They don't have the space, and people don't have any time. And on the weekends, we're far busier, I think, than we've ever been before. And it kind of feels like we achieve less, but be endlessly busy.
It's strange because, I feel like there was the same kind of thing happening with furniture making, and that people
pottery had a huge revival.
Forgot about it
for a period. All crafts really had a big step up. And it's
like furniture making
changed.
Yeah, well, furniture making had this lull, and then I think YouTube came about and changed it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And now there's a lot of people inspired by what you were saying earlier about that idea where you actually make something with your hands, you end up with something.
Yeah,
and it's obviously way quicker as well, so that reward comes much quicker. But boat building, you actually do need like at least a single garage to be building something in.
Yeah, you've got to dedicate the space for a prolonged period of time, and then when it's finished, you've got a boat. You know,
Yeah.
what do you do with that?
Yeah.
Talk us through your kits, Nick. So like your kips, is it skiffs? No, what clinker boats? So you do a kit
Yeah,
for those,
just
and you do a
clinkers.
kit for canoes as well.
Most of the kit work I actually do is I take designs from other people come and see me and they say I want to build a boat. Okay, all right, well, we go. Here's the options, and they'll say I really like this design. I say sure, we can build that. Okay, either I can give you the sheets and you can draw it out and cut it yourself, or I can pop it on the computer. So I don't advertise it because they're not my designs, but I do actually spend a large percentage of my time redrawing other designers or other concepts and making them into a more accessible build format. Not that I would ever say I do it because, hey, you know, it's they're custom. You know, I take the view that if you choose to build it with a handsaw, you can do that. If you choose to build it with a circular saw, you can do that. If you choose to use a CNC machine, you can do that. You know, and this is the difficult part when I'm basically designing market-ready kits for someone else's design. People get pretty worried about that, and I think everyone's very cagey about that information and all that sort of stuff. And I guess, you know, but technology moves so fast that I think that a lot of people, I'm pretty young for my industry. I think a lot of people in this industry are pretty old, and most of them aren't even qualified, particularly in the amateur field. Most of the designers are just experience-based designers. And so it's all hard-fought sort of information that they're protecting. But I find that, yeah, everything's a bit different. Everyone wants their own fluffy dice on their project, and I'm happy to draw it on the computer for them and make various improvements based on what I do. So I offer kits and stuff, and for me the most difficult part of all this, and why I don't push them really like I should as a product, is I love making. I'm really good at drawing and making and building with people in the workshop. But if I was to package a kit and send it out, I have a real fear that I can't help them the way they need help. And the effort that goes into, you mentioned videos and stuff. I really need to make a video series on my system, how I build and all that stuff I do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's really hard to sort of justify the time to do that in the daily flow of things. Being that, you know, now I have two guys working with me. Yeah, one's an apprentice. It's really hard to be like, okay, well, we're going to spend half our time building a boat for ourselves and videoing it.
Would that, to me, it seems like there's a huge benefit if you can sell somebody a kit and then send them a copy of the video and say, this is the step-by-step. This should answer like 80% of your questions just from viewing it.
Yeah.
Step by step.
Yeah.
So you might spend a week or 2 weeks doing
I'm
the
afraid
slow build version.
A boat's a lot longer to build than that.
Well, okay,
Yeah.
double that.
So
Whatever it is.
If I spend a month creating the product, then I could probably do that. But the other thing, and the awful truth of the matter is, I don't like doing that.
Yeah, okay.
I
That's
can
perfect.
I can come up with a boat I want to build. I can draw it on the computer. I can turn it into a kit. I can cut it and I can build it. And that time frame I've measured takes less than some of the plans I've shown you, Brian, for having to draw.
Yeah.
Wow.
You know, just to draw a fully detailed set of plan up. Because if you're going to do a set of plans, you've got to have all the details there. I find that a far more difficult task than creating the boat. And this is the thing.
Right.
I've got to cross my T's and dot my I's. And I have, I don't know, like 30 different boats on the computer that I could build. You know, if someone came in and they wanted one of them of my own design, you know, ignoring all the others that aren't. And I just really, you know, love building. And it's hard to say for me, how far is far enough of the learning process as well? Is there a better way to do this? And it's really interesting as I've gotten older, you know, having an attitude, being fairly young, and, you know, I'm only 33 now, but I've kind of been doing this sort of most of my life. My style and my ethics about, like, you could design a boat entirely out of plywood and make it all locked together and all that sort of stuff, but then are you really building a boat?
Yeah, right.
So I've sort of like stepped back a little bit on that, and I'm trying to keep a bit more of the romance and a bit more of the boat into the boat designs I do now. Because it used to be about making it the fastest with the least material, and it was interesting because yeah, it's not. You don't build a wooden boat in your garage because you need a boat tomorrow, or because you're going to cut corners on, materials or anything like that. So yeah, it's been a real learning process, and how far do I go before I learn? And I guess, and this is something I think that's in the family too, is we have a real fear of not having things done perfectly. Maybe I'm a bit of a control freak over things, so once I finish that kit and finish it and send it out there and I do the video, then that's what it is.
Right.
That's what it becomes. That's what it is. I'll never in my life have another chance to do that project.
Yeah, and that will happen.
That'll happen, and I'm getting to it, but I don't think I've really ever been at that point. And I'm still learning.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's hard for me to judge how far is far enough or how far is too far. I can tell on a project on the workshop floor, but all the designs that I pull myself into, how many details are unnecessary, or, is this a faster way to do it? Yeah. There's the design spiral on the kits, because as my own product, I should be more professional, I suppose, and actually set aside as an actual project to be developed and finished and have deadlines and goals. But yeah, at the end of the day, when I've done a day's work and I want to do something that I feel passionate about and reward myself, I'll get on the computer and I'll draw these things, or I'll do something in the workshop. So they've fallen back as a sort of more of a I don't know, it's funny actually thinking about it. Now I think about it, it's exactly why people come to me. I use my boats as a form of therapy from my boats.
It's from an outsider's perspective, and we talk to so many of our guests about the importance of diversifying income streams. So you can have your passion projects, which are kind of somewhat subsidized by other income into the business. And from me looking at the way you work, and you're saying that the kits aren't really your number one passion, that you would rather take on something like the ant farms, and it's just production work and just smash it out, and then that allows you to do your proper passion.
I accidentally
projects.
fell into that, and that was a good thing. That was about the only thing that kept me solvent during the big L's in Melbourne. The fact that as an amateur boat centre, where most of our clients are sort of senior, we had 2 years of lockdowns, and it's like the first few ones I kept trying to reorganise classes and get people in, but after that we just ended up having to be shut for the whole time. And all I did was, do manufacturing at home, go in and when I could, do a bit and then take it home. And I did myself some RSI injuries from just pumping out these ant farms. Everyone must have been at home thinking, what can I do? I need an ant farm. That's what. And it just overtook my life. And I've been trying to claw back my boat life ever since. And it's getting a balance, and that's finding its way out of my hands into someone else's who'll take it further. But yeah, it's there's a lot lessons learned in it, because the ant farms were iterative design. They were small, they were quantifiable. There was no actual client. I had a wholesaler that I'd sell it to one place, and so it was purely, I don't know, it was a completely different thing, and that's.
But I think it's a really clever strategic decision. It's like, I personally would rather even just do jobs like dressing timber for trade or dressing for DIYers who don't have the facilities to do it themselves. I would rather do that than make bad furniture.
Yeah.
Like if somebody comes to me with a design and says, I want this, I want nothing else, I want this, I would rather just do the dressing job, because it occupies far less space in your head.
Yeah, that's an interesting
so I think it's a
point.
really, really smart business move.
Yeah, it's it's something I really need to sort out. I'm in a bit of a transient period now as we're sort of adjusting to life after lockdowns, and having a few staff, hit full time. I've hit a few projects, actual builds of boats and stuff like that, and it's going pretty well. We've got a few projects, and I'm putting all sort of my time and energies into that, so I can kind of establish more, I guess, professional boat building, but very small and serviced, I guess, for the client. We give them something they can't get anywhere else. And yeah, ultimately, a good decision, I think, for the business is something like plans. Once you put the time into it, you put it up online and all that sort of stuff. And again, doing video content for kits, then you can sell kits. But without having the proper support for people, I'd be unwilling to unleash a product. And I learnt that through ants. Release something and people didn't quite understand it, and it was a bit of a schmozzle.
Killed a lot of ants.
Oh, yeah, that happened. So you learn. But ultimately, I think a plans catalogue and a finished line of products. And the thing that I'm would rather have is I'd rather not be the front man with this sort of stuff. I'll be honest. So I've designed the kits, and I keep the whole of the range of different boats I'm building up as pretty much the same system, so that anyone who builds any one of the boats can build any one of the other boats. And it becomes almost like a franchising idea that someone can come in and I can train them, maybe they're teachers for schools or, at men's sheds or something, and then I can just ship them kits and they can bring in local area people, and because not everyone can travel. Boats take a long time. They have to be built locally where people are. And ultimately, I'm very passionate about little boats, and everyone else should be building them. Not necessarily me, but it's I guess I overindulge in designing new things, and making sure things are built in the workshop now is a priority.
It sounds like you sound possibly a bit like me, where you don't like to do the same thing more than once, apart from the ants.
Well, that's the funny thing with ants, isn't it? Every time I did it, I'd look for another way that I wouldn't have to spend as long doing it.
Right.
And it became really efficient, but, it's, I can't stand it. I'd rather let that business die than make another ant farm.
You can't see yourself becoming one of the ants doing a menial job. It's just like this perfect...
It's ironic.
It's, yeah.
But yeah, if you want to check it out, that's was it? There's Oz Ants, I think. That's the one. Yeah, it's pretty funny. It's
nice.
Yeah, but so I'm really hoping after that we have no more lockdowns, but after that I can clear the workshop floor from all the projects that have project creeps way out of line. Half of them are mine, unfortunately.
But the variation of the projects that are in your workshop are nuts. Like the scale differences, there's no two things that are the same at all in your entire workshop, are there?
That's probably the attempt as well of me to try to do more kits and classes with kits. Yep. Like traditionally, my grandfather would just say, "Hey, Tuesday, Thursday night, come down, build whatever you want."
Yeah,
made things really hard.
Yeah.
But the challenge was always great, and I really miss having him in the workshop there. He was a really good influence. It's I feel like I should have learnt more from him about business while I had the opportunity. But I was on the sander, so hey.
Well, we're coming up to time, so let's just do one more run through of all the different socials, Nick, that people can go to find you. So on Instagram, what should they be looking for?
Nick Atkins Boat Builder.
Cool. And then what was the very long name for the website that you mentioned earlier?
The Victorian Wooden Boat Centre.
Victorian Wooden Boat.
Yeah, there's not many wooden boat centres around, so you should be able to find us.
Yeah, righto. Cool. All right, well...
That was super interesting.
Yeah, man.
I feel like we could go on and on and on.
Oh, yeah. Look,
this could be a long one.
Yeah. It's you got to keep me focused. There's like I said, wooden boats. Hey, once you pull that plank off, you don't know how many more will come with it.
That's just so cool. Chatting to makers from completely different industries. There's furniture makers out there that steam bend and things, but it's just such a different industry. Like the lead times of projects being like 5-10 years is just mind-boggling for us to comprehend.
It is a bit troublesome. I have some projects that have been around too long, and they will be finished this year. I got some good help for it, so
cool.
Yeah, it's
cool. All right, well, thanks again, Nick. Really appreciate you coming on the show, and
thank you for having me.
All the best with the ant farms and whatever else comes out next.
Well, I'm hoping to do just boats, so I shouldn't really talk about the ant farms.
Yeah, we'll see.
All part of
Trying
the
to
process.
focus again.
Yeah.
Stop diversifying.
All right, everybody. Thanks very much for listening. Take care, and we'll see you in the next episode.
See ya.
Cheers, guys. Bye.
Yeah, that was wild.